Hi, let's go over chapter 13. These are pages 345 to 372. And let's start off with Marcus Felsen. Who is he? Marcus Felsen, who was the professor at the University of Illinois, authored the routine activity theory. So, that theory states that individuals in a crime that are motivated anyway do the crime. What the heck does that mean? So any kind of situation that a criminal or someone who wants to act on a crime will do so based on opportunity. With opportunity seeming like the root of criminals doing something, the only real solution they had at the time was a pragmatic one, or in other terms, when you decrease opportunities, in their theory, it would create less crime. It can all be broken down to three main things. One is the offender, which is basically your criminal or someone who wants what is not theirs through any means necessary. The second are targets. That could be anything from someone's property to actually someone they want to get to and inflict violence. And the third are guardians. That includes your policemen or anyone that's around you. That could even include security cameras too. A little weird, but yeah. However, there are some patterns that offenders do follow, such as the fact that if there's a guardian nearby, they won't try to risk it, for they kind of still fear that they're gonna get punished. Not to mention, the more expensive the object is, the more desired they want to get into it or obtain it, which hence more likely you're gonna find more offenders trying to steal phones, something portable, instead of them trying to steal probably a car. But it does it does kind of depend on what they're trying to get or what they're really desiring at the moment. But if it involves going near a policeman or anything like that, they tend to get away from him. When policy is involved, usually they're talking about reducing opportunities of crime. And that involves situational crime prevention, which includes the crime triangle, where it includes the target, usually the offender, and the guardians. But it also includes handlers, which is basically anyone the offender is currently does not want to see them do whatever crime they want to do, and the manager, which is basically the person in charge of the place that they're trying to commit the crime on, and then the place itself where it happens or how it happens. All these create a, a triangle of where offenders have to juggle around debating which to go or what to do. For a criminal, that's a lot of work, especially if they don't want to get caught by guardians or any policemen. So you get rid of the crime and you start seeing it lower down. What happens next? Well, usually displacement starts to happen. And this means that the crime in a specific area is going to move somewhere else. Usually that's kind of what happens. But there are a lot of reasons why displacement is harder to happen. Well, for one, displacement is kind of limited to its people and if they really want that to happen. Well, for one, displacement does take a lot of time and a lot of resources in order for it to happen. Because you're literally moving everything from one area of a specific crime and doing it somewhere else. And usually it's in areas that are similar to it, similar to the area that they do the crime in. But if you have enough resources to counter that, it's gonna be harder for the criminals to store it up again. But for the criminals themselves, it would be harder for them to do the crime over somewhere else, and somewhere they're not even familiar in. That is where the resources and the time comes in for the criminal to decide if they want to do it or not. Because yes, it is harder for them to try to restart their own their own wave of crime, of robbing or violence, because they're literally packing up everything they do and do it somewhere else. Now it comes in the moral of what makes up the criminal. Does the criminal know the intentions they want to do? And according to different criminologists, yes. In terms, they are rational. They know what they're going to get into. They know why they want to get into it. Mostly for their own benefit. And with what but it seems like, yeah, that's literally what everybody would want to do, but they have different morals, or they grew up in different ways to think that that's the only way they could go. But yeah, criminals are rational, and everything they do it in such that their own benefits outweighs the punishment. However, when the punishment is outweighed, when have it flipped, if the benefit doesn't outweigh the punishment, that is where they start to get distraught from doing the crime. And that is where the severity of the punishment does affect on if the offender will continue their action or not. And that is where it gets a lot more interesting, in the sense that if someone does want to continue with their crime, do they do it because it benefits them more, or is it their own personal meaning, such as they're either crazy or they really need a car, or they really need to get what they need to get? And that's where it gets a lot more deeper meaning, where it depends on where the person came from, what value their community had on his psyche. Where do they value riches? Did that person's view on being successful involve that person being wealthy or powerful in any means necessary, if that, even if it means hurting someone else? That is where the question remains. Seeing that a lot of people try to fit him to only one thing, saying that, oh, they know what they're doing, even though half the time they might just do it because they need the money. Now, if you increase the severity of the crime, that's what's going to start the criminal thinking. Do they really need to do this? Is their own greed or lust for power or want gonna outweigh the fact that they're gonna serve a lot more time or receive a lot more harsher punishment for the thing they're about to do. That is where it gets interesting. And that is going to come down to their own morals, their own moral context of where they came from, what they believe in, where they grew up, what kind of family they grew up in. All that comes into one big question for them. Is it worth it? Now, in present time, we're kind of shying away from the severity part and going to a more sense of more of a sense of if there's more police officers, a lot more criminals are not going to do the crime. We're trying to keep criminals away from prisons and more of a path of rehabilitation and basically don't do it kind of sense thinking. From the chapter so far, seems that we're heading towards kind of policing where we do give out enough punishment so they could future offenders can't do it anymore. But at the same time, we teach them into saying what's bad, wrong, or right. And that's a good thing.